Hello, my name is Mariah, and for my final presentation, I will be talking about women's sexuality from the 1940s until present day. During World War II, men were being drafted into the war, which resulted in the movement of many women, as they were either following their husbands or searching for better employment opportunities in bigger cities. With so many women gathering in new cities, it became easier for them to find each other, create communities, and develop relationships with each other. They did so through places such as lesbian bars, private parties, and more. There is a belief that gay people were deeply ashamed of their sexuality and did anything to hide it, but that really wasn't true. Much of LGBTQ+ history has been erased, but the existence of these spaces where they could meet shows that they were not ashamed to freely be themselves in environments where they could do so safely. Tensions between the United States and the USSR grew during World War II, and after the Allies defeated the Axis powers, the Cold War began in 1947. Fears of communists or support of communism within the United States created hysteria throughout the country during the period of time known as the Red Scare. Within that era was another scare, known as the Lavender Scare, in which LGBTQ+ people were sought out and targeted, and many lost their jobs because they were suspected of being gay. The basis of this targeting was that gayness was a rejection of American values in the same way that communism was. Some lesbians began to hide their sexuality again in order to keep their jobs, but others who didn't or couldn't hide that aspect of their lives created their own spaces, where they could freely exist in public, and this led to a rise in lesbian bars. The discrimination against the community during the Lavender Scare led to the development of gay rights organizations, most notably of the Daughters of Bilitis. This lesbian rights organization was founded in 1955 by Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon in San Francisco. It offered an alternative way for gay women to meet each other because bars at the time were often raided by police. Because the Cold War had pushed Americans to reflect the country's values, sexual promiscuity in women was looked down upon. But the population was shocked to find out that it was happening anyway. Alfred Kinsey, a professor, biologist, and sexologist, released 2 reports, one on male sexuality in 1948 and one on female sexuality in 1953. In the report, it was revealed that women were engaging in premarital sexual activities, and 28% of the women surveyed admitted to homosexual tendencies. In 1963, writer Betty Friedan published a book called The Feminine Mystique, which is often given credit for starting the second wave of feminism because of the way it criticized women's role in society as housewives and mothers first and foremost. The book resonated with wealthy white women, but not so much with lower-class women and women of color, because working was a necessity for their families to get by financially, and just being wives or mothers simply wasn't an option. Even Friedan herself wasn't stuck in the role of motherhood, because she had worked as a journalist before and knew that women in the workforce weren't as much of a rarity as she made them seem to be. But the book still had a huge impact and began a new modern feminism for women's liberation. This second wave of feminism focused on matters like women's sexuality, balancing work and family, and the issues of sexual assault and harassment. While Betty Friedan faced controversy for her book, she also later faced some criticism in 1969 when she spoke about how lesbian feminists did not belong in the movement at a meeting for the National Organization for Women. Friedan referred to them as the Lavender Menace. Many other women in the movement also felt that aligning themselves with lesbians was holding them back from reaching their goals, and that the goals of lesbians were irrelevant to them. Because of this, many lesbians left NOW and formed their own groups, one of which was called the Lavender Menace in response to the exclusion from NOW. The group essentially crashed the Congress to Unite Women in 1970, an event which was sponsored by NOW, and encouraged the women at the event to at least acknowledge same-sex love and possibly even explore it themselves. Political lesbianism arose out of the second wave feminist movement. These women believed that sexuality is, in fact, a choice, and that feminists should reject men and heterosexuality as a whole. Naturally, this created tension and upset heterosexual feminists who believed that turning away from heterosexuality entirely would not resolve the problem or actually achieve liberation for women. However, the political lesbianism movement did result in some communities of women only, separated entirely from men. On the night of June 27, 1969, a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn was subjected to a routine police raid. But the people in the bar that night fought back, and it turned into multiple nights of riots on the streets. It is difficult to piece together the events of the uprising, especially how and by whom the riots were started, but trans women and lesbians were at the forefront of them. Many of them were women of color, like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Due to the fact that political lesbians wanted separation from men, a divide between lesbians and gay men had come into existence in the 70s. However, in the 1980s, the AIDS epidemic was having devastating effects on the community and was going ignored by the government. Many patients were discriminated against, mistreated by medical professionals, and dying at alarming rates. Lesbians were seeing what was happening to their community and took it upon themselves to care for them. They did so by doing things like operating food banks and taking on jobs in the hospitals where they could directly help AIDS patients when no one else would. After Stonewall, things had changed. On the one-year anniversary of the riots, a march was held, but the large-scale ones happened later on. In October of 1979, the National March on Washington for lesbian and gay rights took place, and around 100,000 people showed up. Many were still afraid to be out and proud in public. With the AIDS crisis going ignored, the LGBTQ+ community organized another march in 1987. This time, around 650,000 people came to Washington, D.C. The women involved felt that the objectives of the march didn't address the issues of women and lesbians enough, but after it was over, everyone was satisfied with the results of the march and the events leading up to it, such as the wedding, in which 2,000 gay couples gathered to protest for legal recognition of same-sex marriages, and the civil disobedience demonstration at the Supreme Court, where over 600 people were arrested. Here we can see a few photos from the marches. The one on the left was taken in June of 1979 on Gay Freedom Day. The one on the right is from the 1987 march. As we moved into the late 20th and early 21st century, the third wave of feminism began. This one focused on many things they felt the second wave neglected, such as the belief that the experiences of other women that weren't middle class and white deserved to be heard too. The third wave made an effort to understand the intersectionality of women's experiences with respect to how things such as race, ethnicity, class, and sexuality affected their lives. Gains were also made for the LGBTQ+ community. In 2004, the first state to legalize gay marriage was Massachusetts, and 11 years later, on June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriage is legal and must be recognized as such in all 50 states. This took place nearly 50 years after the events of Stonewall, which shows just how long it took for the community to earn the right to express their sexuality freely, though the fight had been going on before Stonewall and even to this day as people in positions of power are still trying to undermine the laws that protect the LGBTQ+ community. It is important that we understand the community's long journey to obtaining equality so that we can all be better allies and supporters of one another. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for watching.